Hey friends, had a wonderful first day with the dog. Second day, I suppose it technically is, but it was the first day where we woke up in the morning with the dog and had the dog all day. Wonderful, wonderful presence in our life. I'm referring to the dog that I talked about in yesterday's post because yesterday we became the proud owners of a Bichon Frise named Biscuit. And so far, so good. He's like weirdly chill, incredibly well adjusted to us. It's almost like he's already was our dog somehow. Very cool. But what I was going to talk about today, I got a comment, a question from one of you, from a viewer whom I don't know, and which is some of my favorite comments because I know I'm reaching people who are not immediately connected to me. A lot of what I talk about is sort of, I wouldn't even say it's personal. It's just very much on this post, the origin of it, my initial impulse to begin doing these daily videos was that I felt like I was having energy and intelligence, wisdom come through into my mind, and I wasn't really expressing it. I would sometimes journal about it, or I would sometimes, do somehow capture it, have a conversation. But I found my initial impulse was, I want to start capturing some of that because it would be really valuable to me, and I think by speaking out loud, I crystallize what's coming through. I have to force it into some sort of expressible form. It can't just stay amorphous in my brain. Sometimes it stays amorphous even as I speak about it, but I at least have to express it with some coherence. And, ideally it also speaks to other people. There's something in what's coming through me that resonates, and that the wisdom is useful to other people. So that's why I say when I get comments from folks I don't know, I am always encouraged that that's truly happening. But the comment that I got was, it was a question. It was a question about could you do a post about heartbreaks and how to get over them, and that would be really helpful. And man, I am certainly not a qualified love expert, but I found your question really interesting because I have had a fair amount of experience with some big breakups, some big heartbreaks. And I've always felt like from a pretty young age, I have been interested in love, in a deep romantic connection. And maybe that's just normal. Maybe there was nothing about my early proclivity towards that was really unique, but it felt powerful to me, and it wasn't something that other kids that I would speak to, or that I usually I would just be too shy to share where I was coming from. But it was only occasionally that I was met by someone where I felt like, oh yeah, they see this the way I see it, or they resonate with this the way that I resonate with it. So it's something that has been a big part of me for most of my life, and it took me a long time to get clear on my, what role romance played in my life, and what that all looks like for me when things are healthy, because they were not healthy for a long time. And where I have, so in other words, I can speak to what you're talking about, but I can't really give you a formula for getting over a heartbreak. All I can tell you is I've been there. It's, I think, one of the most destabilizing things that you can experience. I mean, I tell people that not to discourage them, but actually to encourage them, because acknowledging that getting over a heartbreak, that's one of the most psychologically, emotionally destabilizing things you can experience. It's so unsettling. It's like it pulls the rug out from every other aspect of life. It's really hard to build anything when when there's this active wrestling with that. So that's not to say that things are worse than they seem. That is actually to say there's real dignity in that struggle, and I think understanding that it's one of the bigger emotional quandaries we can find ourselves in, that has always affirmed the value of the struggle for me. So I like to start there and just say, I see that struggle. It's real. It's a big one. And we do eventually get through them. And what I thought, what was provoked in me when I read this comment, or when I got this question about, you do a post about heartbreaks, I thought to myself, I had something come through recently about love, about the nature of romantic love. And, there was a period in my life where this was very front and center for me. I was wrestling with a big heartbreak. It took me multiple years to really kind of get clear and to feel like I had cleaned that energy out of my system in a real way. And somewhere in there, I had a message come through that was something like, I was making a decision about whether or not to enter a particular training program for theater, of all things. And there was something about the decision I was making. I was either going to stay where I was for 2 more years and do this program, or I was going to move from London back to the US and sort of possibly be trying to rekindle this relationship. And I made the decision, no, I'm going to do this thing, and it's going to be about what I am about. It's going to be about what is at my core. I'm going to go the direction that I'm feeling the core of my self is being drawn towards. And that may mean losing this relationship that was so important to me, but I will figure out my relationship to women. I'm a straight male, so in my case, I've had romantic relationships with women. I will figure out my issues with women. This was like a message. It wasn't something that I didn't know how. I didn't know why. I didn't even know if it was true. I just got this signal. So I made the decision. And sure enough, I kind of did figure out my issues with women. I met my wife at this program. But even more importantly, before I became involved with my wife, I went through enough. I kind of got myself caught in a feedback loop of romantic confusion, and really made a mess. Like, really just got myself so tied up that it was almost impossible it wasn't impossible. It was just, I got myself completely off track. And getting that far off track, I'm not advocating that. You do not need to go that far off track in order to solve this. But it allowed me to come back from that experience and really know intimately the kind of destructive patterns and self-defeating patterns that I was prey to. They're internal patterns. They're things we think that love is supposed to do for us. They're ways we go about finding love, engaging in love, engaging in romance, engaging in sex, all these experiences that create powerful, emotional resonances or emotional experiences for us. It's there. I began to see, oh, here's how I work, and here's what doesn't work when I do it this way. And what came through for me recently, I'm jumping now many years ahead, but what came through for me recently was very related to this, because somewhere along the way, and this, I've pieced this together. This came really through clearly as a kind of a way of looking at romantic love recently. But it's something that I've been building in my mind for a long time. And I basically think that there are two components, two central, probably there are more, but two central kinds of love that a romantic relationship involves. One is a kind of, I'm going to call it agapic love. And I'm probably not using that word correctly, but I think of it as the kind of selfless love that we give, and that is not an emotion. That is not a feeling. It is the act of service to another human being. It's the act of extending ourselves in service of their spiritual evolution, really. At the end of the day, that's what it's about. We are giving ourselves, we're giving our energy, we're giving our time, we're giving our wisdom, we're giving our love, we're giving our physical presence. We're giving ourselves to another human being in service of their evolution. That's one aspect of love that's vital for, in my opinion, for a deep and successful romance. The other is what I would call eros, or more erotic love, which is the attraction, it's like the part of the love experience that feels like falling in love. It's the feeling part. And if on the agape side we're giving ourselves in service, on the eros side, where we feel like, even if we are also giving, we feel like we're receiving. We're getting this rush. We're getting these feelings, this emotional high, this butterflies in the stomach, this heart chakra opening, all the things, all the things we feel when we're in love, when we're falling in love. And this is the aspect of love that is, of course, the one that is, it's what rom-coms are about. It's the aspect of love that is very easy to commercialize and commodify and make a love story about. But it is a real thing, and it's how people fall in love. I mean, it's real. And the thing about it, I said a minute ago, this on the kind of agapic side, where the love as service, we're giving ourselves, we extend ourselves for the sake of the other person's evolution. On this side, the thing to know about the romantic, about the eros side of things, the erotic, falling in love, feel good Valentine's Day love thing, is that is a projection of our love ideal onto a person who is not that ideal, but is a close enough, they look like they're a good hook, they're a good place to hang that projection. It's an affirmation, or a kind of an embodiment of our inner love ideal. And when we witness that, when we go and project that onto someone and they reciprocate our our affection, we get that giddy feeling. It's like the dream is falling in love with us. On some level, I see this as we are seeing through to the divine in that person, and it's being answered. It's being we connect with something that's deeper than the individual human being. But ultimately, that human being is not going to live up to that ideal. They're going to be a human being. They're going to fail to live up to that ideal. And when they fail to live up to that ideal, unless we are wise, we will think, oh, the problem is they're not the right person. I thought that they were this. When I was projecting my ideal onto them, we're not actually thinking this. This is just what is happening. When I was projecting my ideal onto them, they seemed perfect. They seemed like I was in love with them. They seemed like the perfect object of my love. But now, that's no longer. Now they're no longer. I guess I was wrong. And that's usually when the heartbreak happens. And we think that we're going to go and find somebody else. And when we finally find that other person, that new person, it's going to be right. It's going to be true love forever. And we try again, and it doesn't work. And we try again, and it doesn't work. We try again, and it doesn't work. And however many times, this is what I went through. I tried this many times, and it didn't work. And at some point, we either settle, we're like, okay, I guess that's love, true love isn't real. Or we become so cynical that it's kind of the same thing. We become cynical and we don't even engage in a relationship. We can be in a relationship from a cynical place, or we can just decide, okay, I'm just not going to be in this relationship anymore. I'm just not going to do this. I'm not going to play this game anymore. The camera's slipping, in case you can't tell. So, but the thing about the fact that this is a projection, usually, I would say 98% of the time, people are projecting their love ideal onto a human being, onto another human being, unconsciously. We don't know we're doing it. We don't think that that's what we're doing. We think we are seeing a true love. We think we're seeing someone. We think we're actually seeing our ideal. We're not. We're projecting it. And when we stop getting that ideal, that sense that we are living with our ideal, our love ideal, we actually still have the choice of engaging in an agapic kind of selfless love and serving their higher evolution. There's nothing stopping us from doing that. But over time, if that's all we're doing, it can be beautiful to be in service to someone else's spiritual evolution, but it can be tiring to never feel like we have the juice of love in our life. So what do? Well, the thing that I have come to, and the thing that finally hit me when I realized that I was just projecting, and that the ideal was always something I was projecting onto someone else, and that I was never going to find anyone who was that ideal, I realized, that on one level that can seem like a tragedy, but only if we buy the delusion that there's someone out there that is like their purpose is to be our ideal, which is there's no reason to think that. It's a kind of a narcissistic assumption about the way that the world works and that love works. People are people. People are in the world to go through their own spiritual evolution. They will enter into relationships with other people, and support them and nurture them and give love and give service and share joy. But no one is out there to be someone else's love ideal. So that's good news, because that means that my projection is actually as good as it gets. It's as good as the real thing. And when I got hip to this, I was like, okay, so really the thing I wanted to start doing is projecting my ideal onto someone, knowing that that's what I'm doing, but it doesn't change the fact that I get all the love, giddy feelings. I get all the Hallmark card vibes. I'm just consciously deciding to project it onto this person. And when they fail to live up to that ideal, that does not prevent me from coming right back the next day and projecting that ideal onto them again. I'm consciously projecting onto them, as opposed to unconsciously projecting onto them. And I don't mean projecting onto them like a bunch of baggage and shit that I want them to do so that they serve my love ideal. I mean, I am allowing myself to see my ideal in them. I see the goddess in my wife every day because I choose to. And even when she acts like not in a way that I think, oh, she's the goddess, that doesn't stop me from still seeing it. And believe me, this flows both ways, because God knows I act in ways that make it very clear that I am not the God of her life, or at least not manifesting all the aspects of that God that she might be, she might think are important, but she can choose to see that in me, despite the fact that my human self does not actually live up to that. So now I've got two kinds of love going on. I've got the service. I've got this deep service of someone else's spiritual evolution. I've got the agapic, selfless service love. And I have the romantic, erotic, joyous, giddy, joy feelings, butterflies in the stomach love. I've got them both. They're very different. You see how they're still different? They're still not the same thing. The agapic love, the service is kind of sort of like serving their higher self, is still, that's a choice I can make, and it's a choice I need to make, because that's going to long term be incredibly important to keeping us in a dialogue, keeping us in a place where we're each individually growing and we're supporting that mutual growth. But at the same time, it doesn't devolve into a domestic partnership between a couple of spiritual practitioners. It can remain a juicy and joyous and erotic love, because I know how to use my power of projection. I use my power of projection, and I just don't allow it, because the thing is, you're going to see other people on the street, you're going to meet other people, and that love, and there's going to be that inclination to project onto them, and that's where you have to just kind of be disciplined and say, I'm not going to do that. It's not because it's morally bad, not because you're cheating by doing this psychological projection thing. And until you get some control over it, you're not going to be able to stop anyway. But you want to notice that that's what's happening, and you want to know that that's what's happening. And then you want to, once you find someone who actually wants to be with you, you kind of want to keep projecting onto them. Don't let that meander around, because if you let it meander around, it's going to confuse you. And now you might still have the spiritual service thing, but it's going to feel like this burden you're carrying for the other person. Maybe they're carrying it for you, and there's gratitude, but the juice, the play and the joy and the erotic pleasure, the actual kind of like feeling of being in love is going to dwindle. So we want to keep that alive. We want to keep that alive too. So now you've got both those elements in play. You are consciously in control of both. You can choose to serve, and you can choose to project. Neither of them is out of your control. That to me is when you get this third kind of love, which I would call true love. When you have both those things, and both those things are conscious, and we've taken responsibility for them, for both of them, for both of them. And you can see that this requires a pretty high level of responsibility regarding our own control over our interior landscape. I'm talking about, like, we're actually, our own psychological and emotional powers of projection are becoming things we employ, not things our mind just does. It's a big step. That's a big step. That takes a fair amount of practice, just like self-reflective practice. But once we can do that, the nature of, that was when I had like figured my shit out with women. That was when I was like, okay, I get it. I'm done being at the mercy of this, projection mechanism that just pulls me whichever way it wants me to go, and it's just nonsense. I'm taking charge of that. And then that's when the first true love of my life really emerged, and became consistent, and became a deep and abiding, lasting experience. So again, I know this doesn't directly address heartbreak, but it does address all the mechanisms, all the mechanics of being in relationship which is how heartbreaks take place. And ideally, you want to find somebody who's at least, if not already, capable of this type of practice around romantic love, at least getting there, at least interested. Because otherwise you'll be alone. You'll feel alone. You do need, that is something you're going to want. So that is my spiel. Wow, this is one of the longest videos I've ever done, but I've had this growing within me as something to express, and I appreciated a question coming up that sort of asked me to express it. So thank you for watching. I appreciate you. Thanks for the comment. That's where I am today. Have a great day. I'll see you soon.